Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. I will have to, we're going to speak about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, we're continuing our discussion about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. We had spoken on the Russian class on Friday. We also spoke last Monday. We'll continue. Today is Wednesday. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada ki jai. Your grandfather and your great-grandfather. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari. Jasodanandana Rajajanaranjana Shodanandana Rajajanaranjana Jamana Tiravana Chari Jamana Tiravana Chari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jasodhanandana Brajajanaranjana Jashodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamana Tira Panachari Jamana Tira Panachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvise Sasanyabadi Paschatya Dasatarine. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada ki jai. So I'm trying to find a document that I was reading from previously, and it is not where it's supposed to be. There's trouble in paradise. Hold on. Don't go anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. I might find it somewhere else. No. Okay, while I'm looking for it, I'll tell you a story. And it's very strange. So, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had a vision around the time he was starting his movement. He had a vision, and I don't know if you call it a vision, it was a reality. the Panchatattva had appeared in Mayapur. Along with his father, along with Gorkashore Das Babaji, Jagannath Das Babaji, and I believe others also. And they all came and told him, get out there on Sankirtan. They said, go out and spread this movement, and we will do everything. We will do everything. Hold on a second. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm distracted looking for this other. Anyway, in the Leelas of Narottam Das Thakur, the same thing happened. He, Mahaprabhu left and his spiritual master left. The same thing happened to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. Within like 2 years, his father left. And his spiritual master left. And he was all alone. And so then they all came back to him. Isn't that nice? So the same thing happened with, maybe I found it. Hold on. Happy day. Well, I found something. I don't know if this is the same document. Anyway, we'll read something from this. So, hold on. Yeah, I think this is it. Yeah. So, okay, now I'm with you. I'm present here. So, Narottam Das did not meet Mahaprabhu, but Mahaprabhu came to him with the Panchatattva and others to encourage him that we are behind you. Rupa Goswami came to Prabhupada and said, go, we are behind you. We will take care of you. So when these great personalities come, they obviously come for a mission which is desired by higher authorities, and those higher authorities are there to make it work. So the mission is set to work. It was set in motion. And sometimes there's only one of all the disciples, there's only one that does something this special, like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, of all the sons, followers, disciples of Bhaktivinoda, he was the one. Prabhupada was the one who did so much. And they were backed by the disciplic succession. Mahaprabhu was there. So I didn't tell that story last time. I wanted to tell it because we see these parallels in the lives of great acharyas. That these personalities come to them, they see them, nobody else sees them. They encourage them. They say, we're behind you, we're backing you, just go out. We'll take care of everything else. And then we see that's what happened. So I'm going to read and then we'll comment. In 1911, so his movement began sometime, maybe he took sannyas in 1918, I believe. So he was a Vaishnava, he was doing many things, but there wasn't an organized movement yet. So he was preaching before that, but the movement organized after he took sannyas, as far as I understand, soon after. He took sannyas in 1918. Prabhupada met him in 1922. On Monday, we acquired the temple that where Prabhupada met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, the temple in Calcutta, the Gaudiya Math house that they were renting was acquired by ISKCON and refurbished and officially opened on Monday. That is a place. What a place. That's the seed of ISKCON. That's where Prabhupada was given that instruction. So this section is titled the Gora Mantra. Gora Mantra means that when we are given second initiation, we are given Guru mantras, Gora mantras, Gopal, and Kam Gayatri. So there's 6 mantras, plus the Brahma Gayatri, so 7. But apparently this Gora mantra was something not known to the general population. So I will read. In 1911, another controversy surfaced, challenging that the name Gora in the Gayatri mantra chanted by Gaudiya Vaishnavas was not an eternal name of Godhead, was not found in the original Vedas, and that Lord Chaitanya was not an incarnation of Godhead, but rather, by his own admission, a devotee of God. So, of course, he defeated this. We have the Gora Gayatri Mantra. He defeated them on the basis of logic and Shastra. Then this is a quote from Prabhupada. My Guru Maharaj's contribution is that he defeated the caste Goswamis. He defeated this Brahmanism. He did it the same way as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did. As Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Kiba Vipra, Kiba Nyasi Shuddha Kene Noi, Ye Krishna Tattva Ta, Se Guru Hoy. There is no consideration whether one is a sannyasi, a brahmana, a shudra, or a grihasta. No. Anyone who knows the science of Krishna, he is all right. He is Goswami. He is Brahmana. So Prabhupada saying he defeated Brahmanism. That means caste Brahmanism, Brahmanism by birth. And that was a monopoly that the Brahmin caste had. And so it's like if you had a caste for an occupation, only people born in this caste can have that occupation, you could hold a monopoly on that occupation. This was my Guru Maharaj's contribution. And for this reason, he had to face so many vehement protests from these Brahmanas of the caste Goswamis. So we had talked about that in the last class, that they had turned against him. They had, on Parikrama, they had stoned them. They had hired the police to kill him. He was exposing them. And so Prabhupada explains this story. Once they conspired to kill him, my Guru Maharaj told me personally. By his grace, when we used to meet alone, he used to talk about so many things. He was so kind that he used to talk with me and personally told me that these people, they wanted to kill me. They collected 25,000 rupees and went to bribe the police officer in charge of the area, saying, you take these 25,000 rupees, we shall do something against Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and you don't take any steps. The police could understand they wanted to kill him. So the police officer frankly came to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and he said, of course, we accept bribes and we indulge in such things, but not for a sadhu, not for a saintly person. I cannot dare. So the police officer refused and said to my Guru Maharaj, you take care, this is the position. This was because he was so vehemently protested. So the mission of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was to expose anything and anyone that opposed pure bhakti, and that was against the actual siddhanta of Shastra. So I once asked Shruti Kirti, Shruti Kirti was Prabhupada's servant for many years. And I asked him a question, what upset Prabhupada the most? And he said, what upset Prabhupada, or what was Prabhupada's worried about the most? He said, what upset him the most, what he was worried about the most, is that the philosophy would be adulterated. And we have what are called 11 Upper Sampradayas. Upper Sampradaya means a deviant line that in some way deviated from the Siddhanta of Mahaprabhu and the Goswamis, because Lord Chaitanya taught the Goswamis. The Goswamis wrote books, and so we're called Rupa Anugas. And so we followed this line through Rupa Goswami, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta is glorified that he didn't tolerate any statement which was against the Siddhanta of Rupa Goswami. So as we know, Christianity has thousands of branches, and Hinduism is a little, it's quite a jungle of different ideas. So it's human nature to misunderstand, misinterpret, and specifically human nature to misinterpret with a personal agenda. So this is what was happening with these different sampradayas, either innocently or purposefully misusing the philosophy. And so Bhaktisiddhanta would challenge, because he wanted to publicly defeat these different sampradayas who he saw to be destroying and contaminating, destroying pure bhakti. And so that was one of his main missions. And so Prabhupada's saying that because that's his mission, he was being attacked. So not only amongst Vaishnavas or upper sampradayas, but these smarta Brahmins who were caste Brahmins who did not believe in bhakti, but believed in Brahmanism by caste. And of course, we know Mahaprabhu was against that. And so Bhaktisiddhanta this is one of his main missions. And he was expert at it. And therefore, he was exposing people, and therefore they turned against him. And one time, occasionally, when you're spreading Krishna consciousness, there's some reaction. It often comes from other religious movements who either fear that we will be successful and or fear that we are deluded, and anyone who comes to Krishna consciousness will be condemned and damned to hell eternally. So they fight back. Some people fight back because they just don't like the Krishna consciousness movement, or for various reasons. So this was happening at some points during Prabhupada's time. This was happening, and we would come to Prabhupada, and he would say that this is actually a sign that we're being successful because things are being stirred up. Now, if things are stirred up because we do something stupid, that's not right. And that's not what Prabhupada's referring to. But he's referring to that if you're actually doing the right thing, because you're doing the right thing and because it's pure, it tends to challenge the status quo of society and the status quo of materialistic religion. And so there'll be a pushback. So he said, that's good. If there's no pushback, you may not actually be preaching strongly because you're not ruffling anybody's feathers. And so knowledge, truth ruffles people's feathers. Even if you give it nicely, it ruffles people. Some people's feathers get ruffled when it's true. They don't like to hear what's true. It's painful. They don't want to acknowledge it because they would prefer to believe whatever it is they believe. So it's not always a bad sign when we create agitation. Sometimes it's a sign that we've done the right thing. And Prabhupada himself was not generally overly concerned with his pushback. And he would say, it's just an opportunity for us to explain further our philosophy, and if we explain it, people will understand it and accept it. So he never retreated from this. He always saw, well, this is an opportunity. People are saying bad things about us. It's an opportunity. And it's a very good point, because a lot of times we think maybe we'll say something that's a little controversial or not so PC, but sometimes it's a great opportunity when there's a little pushback, because then you get to explain it. No, this is what it really means. You're trying to be PC, you may be compromising in some ways. And so it creates some healthy dynamic. I don't know if you know this, but many young people were joining ISKCON, and one joined underage, and eventually she left, and her parents had a case against us and say, well, you held our daughter and she was underage. And there was a question as to whether ISKCON was a bona fide religion, because if it's not bona fide, we wouldn't get status to freely practice our religion and teach it in America. It could be taken away. So Prabhupada said, devotees were very concerned, and Prabhupada said, no, this is a good opportunity. And so they said, Prabhupada, how should we fight the case? And he said, just bring in the Srimad Bhagavatam and start reading from it in court, and let them hear the Bhagavatam, and then they'll know this is a bona fide religion. So that was Prabhupada's strategy. He wasn't at all afraid. He would always say that Krishna will protect you. No matter what happens, just go on. Even when we become arrested. Prabhupada used the example of Prahlad Maharaj, how he was protected. And he used the example of other devotees. He said, so you go on, don't worry, Krishna will protect you. So that was Prabhupada's attitude. He didn't shy away from these challenges. He actually, no, I can't say 100%, because sometimes, as I said, we may have done something wrong, and therefore the bad publicity was actually true and harmful. But when it was a consequence of purely preaching, he accepted it as a challenge. Let's go forward. And we won the court case. And in this court case, it established in the Supreme Court of the United States of America that ISKCON, Hare Krishna movement, is a bona fide religion. It was established in that court forever. So we have the First Amendment freedom of speech as a religious movement status, uninterrupted, unimpeded, and this court case set the precedent. So, we want to be nice and generous with people, loving, kind. At the same time, we don't want to tolerate apasiddhanta, misunderstanding. And we certainly don't want to tolerate it within ISKCON. And sometimes it enters ISKCON. And so that's why you young, intelligent boys and girls, should study Prabhupada's books so you understand the philosophy clearly. That's very important. Chanting is important. Sadhana is important. It's also important we understand the philosophy for many reasons, not for our own benefit as well. Okay, so I'm going to continue reading. In February of 1913, he established the Bhagavat printing press. It was called the Sri Bhagavat Yantra, so that he could begin to publish the important literatures of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. He called the press the Brhad Mridanga. Brhad means great or big Mridanga, the greater Mridanga, explaining that an ordinary kirtan party could be heard only for a few blocks, but this Mridanga could be heard far and wide. And so he set up, printing was very important in his mission. And I believe they had 4 presses in different temples, their own presses. And so we saw Prabhupada also with this intense focus on printing, because that was the focus of his guru, and every good disciple will do exactly what their guru does. So that's why Prabhupada was so focused on printing, because Bhaktisiddhanta said it's a better Mridanga. It can be heard anywhere in the world, whereas the Mridanga can only be heard for maybe 50 yards. Brhad Mridanga. And this Mridanga is on their logo, but books are on their logo also. If you ever, in Mayapur, you can go to Gaudiya Math, you can see their logo. I forget what else is on it. But Mridanga's there, but books or printing, there might actually be a printing press, a book or a printing press. It's part of the foundation of Gaudiya Math. So just pay attention to these dates, and I'll give you some idea of what was going on at this time. So June 22nd, so we are now coming to the end of February. So in a few months, March, April, May, it's like 3.5 months. No, maybe 4 months. Actually, exactly 4 months from now will be the disappearance of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur. He disappeared on June 22nd in 1914. And then about a year and 4 months later, July, August, September, October, November, 5 months later. No, 1 year and 5 months later, Gorkishore Das Babaji dies. So within under a year and a half, his spiritual master and father, who we received first initiation from, left, and his spiritual master left. And maybe you've heard this story before. Raise your hand if you've heard the story about the passing of Gorkishore in relation to who would take care of his body and who would put his body into samadhi. Anuradha has heard it. Anybody else? It's an interesting story. It gives you some context. And if you have a mind for history, then you'll like this. But the reason history is valuable to study, any history, and specifically Gaudiya Vaishnava history, is because history tends to be a predictor of the future. What happens in the past, if it's not corrected, repeats itself. Even if it is corrected, similar things tend to happen because of the nature of people and the nature of this world. So this story will shed some light on it. So you have this problem everywhere. When something pure is mixed with money, it contaminates it. So for example, in traditional culture, I believe the Brahmins were also trained as doctors. And as we know, the Brahmins were supported, but they never had a fee. So in traditional culture, Varnashram culture, there's no money connected with teaching because it contaminates. Teaching is a very pure occupation. In the same way, medicine is a pure occupation. When you bring money in, that means some people can't afford education. That means some people can't afford healthcare. So you can't run a society that way. So that's why we see education is available to everybody. I'm going to try to do something to make my router work, but I might get knocked off. I don't know if it's going to work. So if I do get knocked off, Chan Hare Krishna, and I will be back soon. Okay. We're back. I reset it. So, well, it doesn't look better. It looks worse. So, important. Many people will visit, and then many people will give donations. So being able to have the samadhi of Gora Das Babaji, it's prestigious that I have it in my place or my temple. And it's also good for business. That is obviously the wrong attitude. So there was some controversy. Who will put Bhaktisiddhanta into samadhi? And so many people came claiming to be his disciple, and they were sannyasis, quote unquote sannyasis. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, you have no right to put him in samadhi because you're not his disciple. And they said, you have no right to do it. You're not a sannyasi. So he took up the challenge. He said, okay, well, how many of you have not had sex in the last year? And then a few left. How many of you haven't had sex in the last 3 months? Then more left. How many of you haven't had sex in the last month? More left. How many of you haven't had sex this week? In the last week. How many haven't had sex in the last few days? There was nobody left. That's how we defeated them. Hare Krishna. So they're all so this religious scene was full of people pretending to be renounced who were not, and totally unqualified. And Gora Das Babaji, in his humility, said, when I die, take my body and drag it through the streets so people could see what a non-Vaishnava looks like. That was his, the humility. Sometimes humility comes from prema. Well, not sometimes. Humility does come from prema. We can all be humble to some degree, but when it comes from prema, it's very extreme. So one who has prema and humility will say something like that, which to us sounds kind of crazy. Drag my body through the street so people can see what a non-Vaishnava is. And these other men, so-called sannyasis, they actually thought that's what Gora Das Babaji wanted. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta understood he was just expressing in his prema, in his love, he was expressing deep humility, feeling that I'm not a Vaishnava. But it's not literally what he wanted. And so disciple knows what his guru wants because the disciple understands the heart of the guru, right? So Bhaktisiddhanta knew this is not what he wants. And those people, if they were to put him in samadhi, they would have dragged him through the street. And what a disgrace that would have been. And what an aparad that would have been, right? You're kind of getting a picture now of the craziness that was going on at that time and the potential for deviation. And so I would just say to all of you, don't be surprised when you hear of deviations. Don't be surprised. They're quite common. Like sometimes you'll hear deviation. How could anybody believe that? We have to get used to the fact that people can believe very strange things. Even it goes against what Prabhupada said, and somehow they can try to make sense of it in their own strange ways. So this is what was going on. So, yeah. So anyway, so it was resolved. So he was able to put so this is, I believe this is Bhaktisiddhanta speaking. Excuse me. Anyway, so he put him in samadhi. That was proper. Okay. So 1914 is an important year. There was a devotee who joined the Gaudiya Math. He had come to hear Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. He stayed for a few days. He joined the Gaudiya Math. And he asked for initiation. So a lot of these people were already, Brahmins, Vaishnavas. So they could just join, get initiated, and start. And so this person organized the Gaudiya Math. And it was at this time, right at this time, this was like the foundation of Gaudiya Math. So this person came, he was going to organize it. And it was this time that Bhaktisiddhanta had a vision of the Panchatattva and Yoga Pith. So that's where it all started. This is what they said to him. Don't worry at all. With supreme enthusiasm, preach in the conclusion of pure devotion. Preach the conclusion of pure devotion in intense earnestness. Chant the glories of the name, abode, form, attributes, associates, and pastimes at various places. All of us will help you. There's no need to worry. The support of unlimited people, countless wealth, and boundless learning await the blessing of being engaged in the service of your preaching. They will be received when they are necessary. No type of worldly hindrance or danger will be able to make any obstruction for this great work of yours. We are always with you. Wow. So this is I gave class at 8 o'clock this morning, which is an hour and a half before we started. Part of the GBC strategic planning. They're doing classes every day leading up to Gora Purnima. And so we were talking about how when a devotee is willing to engage in service, then Krishna gives the weapon, so to speak. We were given the example of a soldier. So if you're a soldier, the soldier gives you what? A place to live. They give you food. They give you uniform. They give you all the weapons you need to fight, right? So it's like that. So they're telling Bhaktisiddhanta, you go out, we'll give you everything, we will do it all. You just go out and preach. So it's similar with ourselves, when we make this effort to step out and maybe do what might be difficult to spread Krishna consciousness, then Krishna sees, well, you're making this effort, I have to give you what you need. Sometimes it means intelligence. Sometimes it means Krishna will give you fearlessness. Sometimes it means he'll give you abilities. He'll give you the words. He'll give you some kind of internal guidance, some kind of Shakti, empowerment. So, of course, we see that to the extreme degree in Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and so many acharyas. But don't think that it won't come to you. So when Prabhupada said, the movement will spread with you or without you, but if you stay in it, you'll get the credit. That means, okay, join the army, you'll get the uniform, you'll get the ammunition, you'll get whatever you need. That's what it means. So this is a very important point, because I find for a lot of devotees, the problem is that they're depending very much on their own abilities and intelligence, and then they're making calculations what they can achieve and what they can't achieve based on that. So then they calculate, well, I'll do this and I won't do that. But that's not always the best way to calculate, because if there's a situation and Krishna wants it to happen and you're willing to try, then he'll give you abilities for you to be successful. That's what we see throughout these stories of the great acharyas, and that's what we see even in the lives of Prabhupada's disciples and the current day devotees. So it's important to understand this so that you don't limit yourself. I can't do this. Okay, that's okay. What you can and can't do is one thing, but what Krishna can do through you is entirely different. And you don't want to limit what Krishna can do through you because of your own limitation. So that's definitely what we can learn from this. And I hope you all believe that and trust that. And if you do, you will be able to do more and more wonderful things in Krishna service. And as you do them, your faith in Krishna's empowerment will continue to grow. And you'll continue to do wonderful things, things you never believed you could do. And you will realize that Krishna is empowering you, Krishna is using you because you're willing to be used, not because you're that smart or that great, but you're willing to be used. That's very important. Otherwise, we'll limit ourselves. I can't do that. I never did that. Well, it's true you can't do that if that's how you think. Then I would agree with you. But it's not how you're supposed to think. Hare Krishna. I will say this to you till the day I die, because this is the foundation of one of the foundations of the Sankirtan movement. It's Krishna Shakti Vina Nahi Tarap Vartana. Without Krishna Shakti, you won't be successful. That means that this is not a material movement that will succeed because of material ability alone. We're in the material world. We have to work with material energy. We need material ability, but it's not the foundation or the force that will make this movement successful. Because it's a spiritual movement, therefore, Krishna Shakti Vina, without Krishna Shakti, Tarapavartana, you can't preach because there's only be just dry words, but there'll be no life behind the words. There'll be no Krishna's empowerment behind the words. So that's what we're after. Correct? You believe it? Ekaterina, you believe it? If you believe it, then don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone. Gabriela, step out. Step out, jump off the mountain. Krishna will be there. Now, maybe you jump off the mountain. You say, I jumped off the mountain, he wasn't there. If that's the case, it's because you didn't believe he was going to catch you. So, I'm jumping off the mountain and I don't think he's there. I don't think, yeah. So Krishna says, well, you don't think I'm there? Okay, so I'll just go somewhere else where someone else thinks I'm there. I'll go there. And so the doubt reinforces the doubt and the belief reinforces the belief, because if you believe it, Krishna will catch you. And that reinforces your belief. So, ye tamam prapajante, as they surrender, I reward accordingly. You jump off them. If you're going to jump off the mountain, all I want to say is you better believe, because if you don't, he's not going to catch you. And you're going to end up in trouble. You're not going to be successful. But if you have that belief, Krishna loves that kind of dependence. He loves that kind of belief when you jump off. And he loves to catch you. And that instills you with more faith. Lord Chaitanya wants Krishna consciousness spread. If he wants it and we're willing to try to do it, then why would he stop us? Why would he make any impediments? That doesn't make sense. So the only impediment then becomes our lack of faith or our belief that we have too many limitations to be successful. The other side of the equation, and we've spoken about this a lot, is what Krishna is looking for is the effort, the endeavor. Because if you don't make the endeavor, you can't get the empowerment, right? And maybe Krishna decides not to empower you today, but it doesn't mean you don't make the endeavor tomorrow and the next day and the next day. Because when he's satisfied with your efforts, then he'll empower you. And sometimes he just wants you to try a lot. And he might say, not yet, Krishna Premi, not yet. And Krishna Premi thinks, I'm not going to give up. Because I anticipate if it's not tomorrow or the next day, the mercy will come. So I will continue with faith. Also, as we've said before. If Krishna makes it too easy, then we stop praying. So this anxiety you feel, I can't do this, that actually helps you pray. And so sometimes Krishna may keep you in that anxiety to keep you on your toes, so to speak. You just offer a little prayer, Krishna, help me. And then all of a sudden, the whole universe comes to serve you. And you think, oh, that was easy. I don't even have to do anything now. So that Krishna will do for the pure devotee, because it won't make the pure devotee lazy, but it would make us lazy. Don't you think it would make you lazy? One little prayer and everything came easily. It would. Yo pienso que este es un problema. Después es mejor que Krishna makes it a little difficult for difícil. Es mejor. Difficulty is better. Ekaterina, did you understand what I said? That was Spanish. Well, I don't even know if the Spanish devotees understood what I said. That's always, that's always another question. Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes it's better that Krishna makes it difficult, because we have a tendency to become lazy. Or we may have a tendency to be lazy if it's too easy. Okay. So, 1918, they rented a house at Ultadanga refurbished and had the grand opening on 2 days ago, on 21st of February 2022. So he started traveling. I traveled a lot in Bangladesh. It wasn't Bangladesh at that time, because there was so many Gaudiya Vaishnavas there, and the history of great Vaishnavas who appeared there is there's a vast number of great Vaishnavas who appeared there. And so he went out traveling and preaching in 1918. That's when he took sannyas. And he would go door to door with his disciples. So at this time in 1918, he's born in 74. So it makes 26. It makes him, this time he was 44. So now his movement is beginning, and he's at the age of 44. So he's out there going door to door because he's a young man with energy and vigor. Okay. Okay. So then, 1922, that's the year Prabhupada met him. It began publishing his first magazine. So I think this 1919 was 1918, 1919, yeah, 1918 they rented the house. So that's kind of like the official first place and real serious attempt to organize Gaudiya Math is 1918. So he's 44 at that time. Okay. All right. He arranged for the completion of the Vaishnava Vishwakosh. This is an encyclopedia of Vaishnava vocabulary. Bhaktivinoda Thakur asked him to do this. And he had been collecting material for almost 20 years to do this book. And then in 1921, he published a book called Achar and Acharya. Achar means action, and Acharya means one who teaches by his actions. And this book was exposing so-called Vaishnavas who had been using Vaishnavism to make money. Have you ever heard this statement? Have you ever heard this statement? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, they're using the shalagram shila in the temple to crack nuts as a stone for cracking nuts. Raise your hand if you've heard that before, that statement. They're using the shalagram shila as a stone for cracking nuts. This was literally happening. As far as I understand, as far as what I've read, this is literally happening. They were eating nuts and taking the shalagram shila and cracking the nuts with the shila. Hare Krishna. How does that make you feel? Angry? Depressed? This is what was going on. You could imagine how he felt. Whatever you felt when you heard that, he was feeling 100 times more, I'm sure. Okay. Hold on a second. I have to close some things that might make my computer faster or the connection less burdened. Okay. So then he said, you know that statement in Bhagavad Gita, and Prabhupada says, it's better to live as an honest street sweeper than to be a charlatan meditator, to be a false spirit. It's better just sweep the street honestly than to be a false spiritualist. Well, that's where he got it, from this teaching of Bhaktisiddhanta, because Bhaktisiddhanta would say, rather than show the deity and show that you're some kind of sadhu, just be honest, get a job. Don't fake it. So there's a lot of faking going on, apparently. So the saying that they're using the deity to crack nuts, it also meant they're showing the deity to make money, but I also read that some people used it to crack nuts. So both things. Hare Krishna. But even showing the deity to make money, I am worshiping the deity so I can make money. Like bhakti that destroys your bhakti. Bhakti is all about service. Okay, I will marry you as long as you have a lot of money. Let me see your bank account. You don't have a lot? Okay, I'm not going to marry you. So true love, right? You know how do you think a guy feels? He falls in love with you. He's mad about you. He'll do anything for you, but he doesn't have a lot of money. And you say, I'm sorry, you don't have a lot of money. So it's like, Krishna, I love you. But you have to give me money. So this contaminates the love, so-called love. Contaminated. All right. So that now in ISKCON and Gaudiya Math, they do Navadvip Dham Parikrama and of course Braj Mandal Parikrama. He was the one who revised it. And this was, I think, in 1923. Yeah. And so we're looking at like about 1918 or 19 to 19, what is it? He left, I think, 36, 37. So we're looking at about 19 years, right? Or more or less, 19 years of preaching. And so he was sending disciples all over India. They opened 64 temples in India during his presence, and one in Burma. Yeah. Yeah. So we told that story about when they went on Parikrama. There was a group that started stoning the devotees. You know who that group was? It was those upper Sampradayas. So he was preaching that they're doing their kirtan, their temples, their puja just to make money. He said, this is not like merchandise. You know, reciting Bhagavatam it's not a merchandise, it's not a business. He exposed them all. And this is how they couldn't retaliate philosophically, so they had to retaliate with violence. Interesting, right? Don't you find that interesting? They're supposed to be Vaishnavas. Can you imagine, like just imagine, there's a Prikram party, and a group of so-called Vaishnavas are throwing stones at, this is also women on the party, and elderly women. It's just unbelievable. They were so, he's exposing them, and they're exposing themselves more by their response to his exposure. Hare Krishna. Mm. 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 Okay. This is what he said. Let the critical people calumniate. I don't even know what that means. Us to their heart's content. Let them attack us, find fault with us. We will not mind. Let us roll in the dust and forget everything in the ecstasy of intoxication by excessive drinking of the strong and tasty wine of love of Hari. We have to look up that word. Who knows what it means? Calumniate. It's not a word that I use. Computer is very slow. Make false and defamatory statements about us. Yeah. Blasphemous, critical statements. Okay. We will not mind them. Let us roll in the dust and forget everything in the ecstasy of intoxication by excessive drinking of the strong and tasty wine of love of Godhead, love of Hari. So this is interesting. Why is this interesting? Who can say why this is interesting? You have two things, right? You have this very strong criticism, and Bhaktisiddhanta saying, whatever, who cares? Why is he saying whatever, who cares? Not why. How could he say that? What's going on that he could say that? So what is he saying? Well, let's drink, let's excessively drink. Let's get drunk on what? The wine of Lord Hari. So let's rephrase this. What he's saying is, we can get drunk on the wine of Hari. So why should we stop drinking that to pay attention to these other people who are critical? Because that's just going to cause us to put our wine down and just become upset. So it's a test for all of you. You know, when you get upset about things, what I'd like you to do is when you get upset, start thinking, okay, I'm putting my attention on this. Is that because I don't have attraction for the wine of hearing about Lord Krishna? Is that because I'm not intoxicated with Krishna Bhakti? And therefore, I can afford or I'm willing to put my attention on something that's not Krishna conscious. That's a thought. Hold that thought in your heart. Every time you get disturbed and your mind begins and heart begins to focus on that disturbance, try to remember that every minute I forget Krishna is 60 seconds of Maya. So, is it worth it? Of course it's not, but we have to talk to our mind like this. Is this worth it? I'm putting energy into something that cannot produce any benefit for me. In fact, it's disturbing me. And it's causing me to forget Krishna. Am I going to be foolish? Or am I so weak that I'm so willing to give up my remembrance of Krishna to focus on something disturbing like this? That's a good thought. See if you can keep that, write it down. I'm sure I've talked about this in other contexts, maybe in a different way. I mean, there are a lot of legitimate issues to focus on. But sometimes, even though they're legitimate, they're not worth the cost in how it affects you and how it disturbs you. And it's easier to see that when other people are doing it than we're doing it ourselves. But I'm sure you've seen it in other people, and you've probably thought, this devotee is really making themselves miserable. They, instead of chanting, they're talking about this. And every time I see them, they're talking about this, and they're not talking about Krishna. It's really harmful. So are we going to allow this world to pull us away from Krishna's lotus feet? Or are we going to stop that process when it begins to interfere with our Krishna consciousness in realization that this disturbance can very easily take me away from Krishna? I think that's very simple. Very, very simple. But the more you care about your Krishna consciousness, the easier it is to control things that disturb you. Because you see that those disturbances are taking my remembrance of Krishna away. Right? Correct? So, are you willing to pay that price? If you are, all I can say is I really feel sorry for you, because it's a big mistake. You shouldn't do that. It's not worth it. You'll get nothing from it but pain. Okay. So I'm just checking the chat to see if there's any chat to chat. Can you hear me okay? Yes? Super. Just like a radio show. Right? With my radio, I have my radio mic. For the appearance day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura ki jai, we will continue reading. Yes. So there's nothing in the chat, so we'll continue reading. So basically now what's happening is the Gaudiya Math is progressing. Then more devotees are coming, more temples are being opened, more deities are being established, more books printed. It's just, Prabhupada said it was like coast to coast of India, up and down and coast to coast. There was this Krishna consciousness was spreading very rapidly. And the mood of the Gaudiya Math was to expose, as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta did, to expose all forms of cheating religion, upper Sampradayas, etc. And Prabhupada said something which is quite interesting. So pay attention. Ladies and gentlemen, pay attention. Prabhupada explained that during the time of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, the spreading of Krishna consciousness was vast and powerful. And it was so powerful that all these other organizations that were previously successful became diminished because the Gaudiya Math was exposing the cheating or the misconceptions in these other philosophies and other organizations. So Gaudiya Math was growing and these other organizations were shrinking in the wake of Gaudiya Math because they were being exposed. Like if there's some big article, proven, science proves the Moderna vaccine causes this problem. It's not a guess anyway. It's like, you just lose all your faith in that company and just forget it. It'll never take another pill. You throw away all the pills you have made by that company. It's just, so people were losing faith because these organizations and so-called gurus were being exposed. Then Prabhupada explained, but shortly after Srila Bhaktisiddhanta left, there was a fracture. And I think that fracture turned into multiple fractures. One big fracture in Gaudiya Math, but there were many multiple fractures. So united we stand, together we fall. We're all together, we're stronger. So it weakened the fabric. And then there was some infighting, which further weakens it. Infighting means I'm supposed to be fighting with Maya, not my god brothers and god sisters. So when you start fighting with your god brothers and god sisters, it's that energy that was supposed to go out to spread Krishna consciousness is being used to some degree, too much to a degree internally. So then Prabhupada said that the Gaudiya Math, they lost their potency. And then Prabhupada said all these movements that had decreased because they were being pushed back by the preaching of the Gaudiya Math, all those movements started to become stronger, rising as the Gaudiya Math became weaker. Isn't that interesting? So Prabhupada, I've written about this in Living the Wisdom of Bhakti. If you don't have a copy, you can get it on Amazon for the low price of, I have no idea, $14.95 or something. You can get it digitally for $3 or $5. So we wrote an article about this. And Prabhupada said, the success of these other missions, these impersonal missions, the missions of the bogus gurus, their success is directly the fault of the Gaudiya Math. Because if they continued preaching the way they were, these other organizations would never have succeeded. So we can apply that today. That's a big challenge. This is the success of organizations that are promoting the wrong ideas. It's our fault, because ultimately, if we're successful, those movements will be held at bay. The thought, another thought for you today. So many thoughts. You're probably all in anxiety with all these thoughts, but if you're not in anxiety, if I don't put you in anxiety, you'll be anxiety about money and what you're going to eat and how to, get a new job. So it might as well be an anxiety about this, because this will purify you, right? There it is. Click on the link and you can get my book. You probably all have it anyway. Okay. So, yes. Yeah. So then in 1930 they got this huge temple in Kolkata, then known as Calcutta, in a place called Bagh Bazaar. And a very wealthy devotee gave the money for this place. Beautiful temple. But it's interesting because you probably know the story. Prabhupada has told this story, said that. So they went from the rented house at Ulta Junction Road to this beautiful temple in Bagh Bazaar. And it was much bigger. And Prabhupada said that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta observed that now the brahmachari sannyasis, they were fighting over which room would be theirs. I'm assuming that it was much different in the rented house. It wasn't so nice. There weren't so many rooms. And he was very upset. Whenever there was fighting, he was very upset. And he started thinking, maybe we should sell the marble and print books. Maybe that would be better. So, but the point I think is obvious. Is just having a temple is neither here or there. It's what happens in the temple that's going to make the difference. So here they had the temple, and then he had second thoughts. He thought it was actually better in the smaller temple. There's a better mood, we could say. Maybe there was more cooperation, more of a preaching spirit. So that's an important point. Sometimes we think, well, if I just have this, the preaching will be successful. It may be true, but not necessarily. Because if you get A and you lose your Krishna consciousness, then it's not going to be successful. Okay. We'll get to your question in a minute. So, Vaishnavism is above Varnashram. So if you're a Vaishnav, you're a devotee, you're not actually part of Varnashram. You're not a Brahmin. You're not a Kshatriya, you're not a Vaishya, Shudra, you're a Vaishnava. It's transcendental to any material designation. But, pero, as they say in India, butta. They don't say the, they say da, butta. I have fun with that. Butta. So people didn't understand that Vaishnavas were higher than Brahmins. They thought Brahmins were the head of the four castes. So traditionally, Vaishnavas had nothing to do with the caste. So if you became a Vaishnava, let's say you were raised in a Brahmin family, you would take off your thread. You say, I'm not a Brahmin, I'm a Vaishnava. It's higher. You wouldn't chant Gayatri, and you take your thread off. Did you know that, Tanya? Yeah. So any signs of Varnashram, you would get rid of. But what Bhaktisiddhanta found was that people didn't understand this. So he thought, well, we have to give them Brahminical initiation in the thread so they'll be respected as Brahmins. But we want to teach also that Vaishnavism is better, higher. But so people don't disrespect them, then he gave that. And sometimes in past times, Vaishnavas followed certain practices which were not absolutely necessary for them, but to gain acceptance from Brahmin communities, gain the respect, so that people would respect them enough to take them seriously. They would adopt certain practices that weren't essentially necessary for Vaishnavas, but it helped in the preaching. That's interesting, isn't it? It's kind of like, it was the inverted version of Krishna West. It was like Krishna East. They went to a very conservative side to be accepted by the more conservative mood of the times. They said, well, how can you be Brahmins? How can Vaishnavas be higher than Brahmins? Oh, we do this. We Vaishnavas have their own rituals, just like the Brahmins have. Like, oh, okay, we can accept you. Hare Krishna. Interesting, indeed. Okay. And his idea was that, if people are offending Vaishnavas, then it ruins their chances for bhakti. So he didn't want people to offend them. So he made this adjustment. Something to think about, right? Okay, we'll read one more and take some questions. Oh yeah. Did you know that there was a lot of opposition to Bhaktisiddhanta because he was such a revolutionary that even in Vrindavan, they wouldn't let him into the temples. I think only the Radharaman temple let him in initially. Then eventually, he was let in the other temples, but initially, only the Radharaman temple let him in. It's hard for us to believe, right? But he was breaking with tradition. And he was breaking with tradition in order to preach Krishna consciousness. That's where, he wasn't, it's not that he was breaking rules, but he was breaking rules that were not necessary or were getting in the way of preaching or getting in the way of helping people. So we'll take your questions now, or Gabriela's question. How do so's people faith in Krishna consciousness movement if when those same people search on Google, they can find many articles with serious accusations against a famous guru of the Vrinda group, and they end up thinking that also in the Hare Krishna movement are abusive leaders, that they have fallen just like in the same religions or even other yoga movements? Maybe you have to write an article and explain. Do you have a public relations communications department in South America? Because they're the ones that should do this. Typically, they would do it. So you could find out and express your concern to them. And if there isn't one, then just let me know and we can express that concern here, and then they could arrange for that to be done. Now, you have to consider this because people from that mission are starting to come to ISKCON. And would that be a deterrent if we publicly denounced him? That may not be a good idea. So you have to weigh both, right? Maybe you're thinking of coming to ISKCON and they publicly denounce him and say, well, I don't want anything to do with ISKCON because of that. So you have to see how big a problem is it, in terms of, is it just a small number of people who are dissuaded, or is it a large number of people? What's going to be the largest? But you can make a very polite official statement that Paramadvaiti Swami was at one point a member of ISKCON up until such and such year, at which time he started his own organization and worked independently of the leadership of ISKCON, and ISKCON had no jurisdiction over his actions. And we disapprove of his actions. And we are sworn to the integrity of our leadership, something like that, That would be acceptable. Maybe, I hope. Is this from you, Tanya, or from Facebook? From you? Yeah, because if it's from Facebook, you will say the name of the person, right? Okay. Tanya says, I never thought about it in that way. That we have to take action to stop people from making offenses against Vaishnavas, just to stop them from destroying, destroying their chances for spiritual life. Yeah. There's a Bhaktivinoda Thakur, whose house we will be visiting soon. You're all invited to come with me if you're in Mayapur at that time. Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that if you see a Vaishnava who's critical or blasphemous, it's okay to quote unquote criticize or acknowledge this, acknowledge his wrongdoing, if you believe it will destroy him. So that therefore your criticism is aimed to stop him from destroying himself. If you believe it will destroy you, destroy is a big word, harm, or if you believe it will harm others, then it's not offensive or critical, quote unquote, to state what is happening, because your mood is to protect. And yeah, Is that okay? Yeah. From Doya Moy. A question. What can we do to generate a real Vaishnava union to fulfill the dream of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati? And if meetings are being held for that. There is an organization that's trying to unite Vaishnavas. ISKCON has not been participating a great deal in it, and I don't know what it is doing and where it's gone. But, we have to clean our own house first, sweep your own doorstep first. So a Vaishnava union to fulfill the dream of Bhaktisiddhanta, it seems at this point that these other organizations are working independently of one another. It could be Doyamoy or Dayamaya, depending if it's Sanskrit or Bengali. It could be that in the future, there will be a different way of thinking and that future generations will find it easier. Future generations within different organizations will find it easier to work together. That could be very possible because we already see that amongst the younger generation, like devotees born in the movement. They are more accepting. They have friends in other Gaudiya Vaishnava organizations. They have little or no problem with them. Our generation seems to have more problem with them than the next generation. So if that continues, there may be a natural convergence, so to speak, of different Vaishnava organizations in some format that can be more united. But somehow or other, at this time, it's not happening well. It's not so much the mood of Prabhupada's disciples for whatever reason. I'm not sure. It's just not. And so many of us have noticed that the second generation is more accepting than the first. So these things could change. But at least, Doyamai, we can work on our own organization of generating real Vaishnava union, Vaishnavi union as well. Hare Krishna. It was one of those days where I was up late last night and up early in the morning. And you know how you can tell I'm tired? You could probably tell. Count the number of jokes I tell. The more I tell, the more energy I have. It's a fact. That's what I just realized. There were no jokes today. I was too tired to tell jokes. And when I'm very energetic, I tend to be funnier, just naturally. So you've got a very serious Mahatma Das today, as you notice. But of course, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he's very serious. So that's a serious topic, right? Hare Krishna. So now we can end class. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. May Srila Bhaktisiddhanta purify your heart. May his remembrance inspire you. May his remembrance encourage your austerity.
Gurudev, I think there is one more question from...
One more. I mean, I have to stay awake longer? Oh, no. From Devananda. Is it more difficult to break tradition now where it might be advantageous with managerial authority spread across more lines than in Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Goswami's time? Well, this is a quite interesting question because when you're dealing with cross cultures, like now we have in ISKCON, we have so many Indians who are practicing devotees, where during Prabhupada's time, we had very few. Very few in the first place in the West, but more in England, but not that many in America. And not that many getting initiated, but now so many Indians practicing, getting initiated. So it's their different culture, and so many in India. It's a different culture. They see things differently. So one answer to your question is that adjustments And Prabhupada says that in the Chaitanya Charitamrita or Bhagavatam, adjustments that are made in America you may not want to make, or the way Prabhupada said it. How it's done in India is not how it's done in America. So now we don't have India in America. Now we have India in America and Americans in India. So you have the two cultures next to one another, which makes it a little more complicated. Because because cultures are different, then you may want to emphasize different things according to the culture. But ultimately, what will help for making people Krishna conscious is what we want to emphasize the most. So I don't know if it's more difficult now. It's a slightly different challenge. But Apasiddhanta is always going to be there, even within our own organization. The need for change as culture changes will always be there, and there will always be resistance to change. As Prabhupada said, you can change details, but not principles, but it requires intelligence to know the difference between a detail and a principle. So I may change some detail, and you'll say, no, that's a principle, you can't change it. And I'll say, no, it's a detail, I can. So that also requires intelligence. And so I'll just make a prediction. I don't think it takes a great brain to make this prediction. But because we're individual, we see things differently, and there will just be different subcultures within ISKCON, where the different subcultures will see things in a specific way or emphasize one aspect of bhakti a little more than another. And I think because of human nature, it's the only way we can stay together as a unified whole is to make room for all of that. And if we don't make room for all of that, then we are going to have factions, and we're going to split over these factions just because we're different. So we see some devotees are very focused on tradition. They feel the greatest fear to ISKCON is it's breaking from tradition. And though they're introducing traditions that are more traditional than traditions Prabhupada introduced, because they feel that's ultimately what he wanted to do. Others are resistant to that. Say Prabhupada was more adaptive. You have to meet people where they're at, and there are differences in the middle, and there are differences in understanding the philosophy. And so, in my mind, the challenge is not to come to an agreement on these details, because I don't think we will, because we're different. Some agreement on some, but sometimes not complete agreement. The challenge is that if we don't agree, how will we coexist in a unified way? I think that's a much more important challenge, because sometimes you just can't agree. You're different. I don't like, believe it or not, I don't like beets. I don't know. What are beets in Spanish? How do you say beets in Spanish?
Frijoles.
Beets, frijoles? No.
You said, I hear beet.
Yeah, beets. How do you say beets?
Betabel.
Yeah, I don't like them. No me gusta. And I'm 71 years old, and I still don't like them. And so I doubt I'm going to like them anytime soon, if ever. So you see things in a certain way. I give 100 classes to change your mind. With every class I give to change your mind, you believe what you believe even more strongly. That's human nature. And it doesn't mean what you believe is wrong necessarily. It's just another way of looking at it. So I think the real challenge is how we can coexist with these different beliefs, not to try to unify them. That's my opinion. Maybe some disagree with that. This is through various experiences I've had in ISKCON. This to me is where the focus needs to be. There may be unity necessary, where unity is necessary, and unity can be created where it can be created, but often it can't be created because we're different. So now how do we coexist peacefully because we are different? That's the challenge I see. And if we don't master that challenge, we'll have problems. And then we'll tend to turn against one another in some way, criticize, create Vaishnava Brhad. It's not healthy. Okay, that's my final speech. And we can end class and we can start over. Just wake me